Kirby saying they are taking this day by day, and we know that very well here as we've been bringing you all of the updates. I want to bring in foreign policy expert Michael Santo. Michael, thanks for joining us here on the show.
You're welcome.
Okay, so first response to John Kirby and those developments on military buildup from the U.S.
Well, there's a serious Russian threat, and we have to protect our NATO allies. We made a loose agreement with the Russians that we wouldn't keep permanent forces, so we've tended to rotate. But the Russians really are violating the spirit of our agreements that we made under Gorbachev, because the spirit was that the Russians would end their police state and end their occupation that had once extended over virtually all of Eastern Europe. So they're kind of twisting and saying, oh, NATO's expanding, but we didn't barely even have forces. So we have to defend our NATO allies. We're rotating just so we can say it's not permanent, but if the Russian threat becomes semi-permanent, those forces will certainly evolve into a semi-permanent force as well.
So when would we start to know that, if it needs to be more permanent? What's the timeline on all of this?
I think we're close to that point now. I mean, because they're saying a massive invasion of Ukraine is imminent. So we're expecting, unfortunately, tragically, to see massive invasion of Ukraine unfold over the next week, maybe the next few days. Putin opportunistically took advantage of the protests in Belarus, a neighboring dictatorship, also former Soviet republic, in 2020 to effectively seize control of that. So from that position in Belarus, that greatly amplified is a threat, not only to Ukraine, but our NATO allies of Lithuania and Poland. So the situation's evolving where the Russian threat is already far more serious. So I think that we're just trying to leave some more room for diplomacy. I think it's evolving into a permanent presence because we're starting to trip all over ourselves to be able to say it's not permanent. So I think it's evolving into a permanent U.S. presence because we are obligated by treaty to defend those countries. And anything short of a permanent presence is not going to really cut it.
Well, we're hearing that Russian forces are staging closer and closer to Ukraine, and our officials saying, quote, they are ready. What does that mean, they are ready?
It means that a lot of the units have actually put themselves in positions where they're more exposed to elements, they're in their vehicles in forward fighting capacity, and they can really only, in a way, maintain those type of positions over a few days. So 80% have switched to basically the position they would take right before attacking. And that's something that usually they would only hold for a few days. But they're also trying to throw us off. So they can shift back and forth. But it appears that the bulk of the combat force has shifted into full attack mode, except isn't yet opening fire or going, just openly crossing into all of Ukraine, though of course they've sent reinforcements to a part of Ukraine that's been effectively occupied by the Russians for about the last 7 years.
Well, we're taking a look at video from earlier this week, which feels like years ago, of shelling in Ukraine. Well, we're also hearing of a chemical plant in Crimea that was evacuated, and John Kirby being asked about this today, and he said this is just yet again a perfect play into the disinformation playbook of Russia. What have you been hearing about that, and what are your thoughts on those reports?
We saw actually a few weeks ago an absurd allegation, but the Russians make many absurd allegations against us. But this is frighteningly escalating and increasing in numbers. A few weeks ago, they accused the United States of preparing a chemical weapons attack in Ukraine. Obviously, completely absurd, ludicrous, but they're conditioning their people and brainwashing them to believe that these lies about us. And it's very frightening because it would even justify the use of their battlefield nukes. And I have to point out something to understand about Russia. While we have strategic parity enforced by the New START treaty, roughly, between Russia and the United States, the Russians have up to 10 times as many battlefield nukes as us. Those are nukes for the battlefield, which we basically have decided not to use. And it's very frightening when they're accusing us of preparing to carry out a WMD attack, because they're giving themselves justification for what they have often bragged is their ace in the hole in fighting NATO forces. And it's very scary. And it really gets to the core of what makes Russia a very dangerous military. Not only does it have the world's largest nuclear arsenal, they have built up an enormous advantage in tactical. Those are the non-strategic nukes. And there's just a danger. It's the path they're leading down on. Not necessarily in Ukraine, but the fact that they keep making these nuclear threats is very scary. And their false accusations that we're going to carry out a chemical weapons attack. Obviously, God no, we would never, our country would never do that. But they seem to be setting the stage with this. It's extremely dangerous propaganda. I don't think that people should have any illusions about how dangerous this government under Putin is.
Right. Well, Michael, take a listen to this. We are just getting in this address from President Zelensky to the people of Ukraine. Want to read a couple of quotes from it. Zelensky saying, "Today I initiated a telephone conversation with the president of the Russian Federation." He says silence, although there should be silence in the Donbass. He said that they're telling you that this flame will liberate the people of Ukraine, but the Ukrainian people are free. They remember their past and are building their future. He said, Ukraine on your TV news and the real Ukraine are two totally different countries. Ours is real. What's your response?
Well, of course. I mean, Ukraine is a democracy that we've been helping be more democratic. And we tried in the 90s very hard to sponsor democracy and a prosperous capitalist society in Russia, too. And unfortunately, sadly, we failed. Putin, hardcore KGB guy, took over. But what the Russian propaganda is saying is that the Ukrainian government is a dictatorship. They're fascists. They're neo-Nazis, and they're a puppet regime of the United States and NATO. And that we've created this illegal puppet regime just to destroy Russia, which is frightening, by them repeatedly referring to the Ukrainian government falsely as neo-Nazis and as a threat to Russia, to Russian existence, which is absurd. But again, this is how they're conditioning the Russian people. They're justifying a massive invasion of Ukraine. And it could get extremely deadly, both for Ukrainians and Russians. And, this is not the world that all of us, at least in the United States, wanted to believe that we lived in 2022, that we would have a World War II style war, and it could get very bloody. So, yes, I think as Americans living in a democracy, a free country that has sponsored the global order, of course we feel for Ukraine. And of course we support Ukraine. And it's just a shame that Putin, who's a KGB dictator, is trying to literally present Ukraine as a puppet of the United States, a dictatorship, and neo-fascist. It's all lies, deliberate lies, and it's very, very sad.
Michael, what should we be looking for in the coming days here? What are the next steps when it comes to Putin? It's hard to say, and Kirby even saying today he is the only real one who understands the timeline of all this. But what should we be watching for?
I mean, Putin is dangerous and cunning, and he's very resourceful. So he rapidly evolves his plans to throw us off and adapt to changing conditions. The Russians are capable of massive cruise missile attacks. They can be smart or not so smart. Remember the Tomahawks we used in Desert Storm, 1980s technology. Obviously, the Russians have it by now. So they have very good cruise missiles, massive artillery that can be devastating. We've seen in Syria that often the Russian military does not even care about saving civilians. So they use those brutal tactics in Ukraine. Even with their smart technology, they could kill tens of thousands of Ukrainian civilians easily. The Ukrainian military, bolstered by some of our support and anti-tank missiles, could put up a big fight, and that's not a guarantee. You never really know until the bullets fly, obviously, how things will play out, regardless of how Putin plays it. But we're looking at all kinds of, we could see amphibious landings, we could see airborne landings from the Russians, although that's very dangerous for the Russians. We could see a frontal assault. They're moving into the separatist areas, which means that they're gaining Ukrainian territory without even a fight, and they're moving tanks further onto Ukrainian territory. There could be a more limited operation. It could just be airstrikes and cruise missile attacks. So there's a whole spectrum, but it's and the Ukrainians God willing, could put up a very big fight, but it would be very costly, or they could collapse. They're facing easily the second most powerful military in the world.
Well, it's all something that we'll be monitoring there, as I know Kyiv has been the main point of focus right now, which that's where we're actually seeing the troop movements, and also the United States being very clear about next steps when it comes to sanctions being imposed, saying they will be severe and swift if Putin continues to escalate. Last thoughts, Michael.
It's interesting. I think that one thing that throws off the American viewers is in decades past, we didn't have such widespread access to satellites. So we're seeing this massive buildup by the Russians that they can't hide because of commercial satellites. And based on the lessons of the seizure of Crimea that hit faster than anyone could even do anything, the Biden administration has also chosen the strategy of full transparency. So they're releasing a lot of their intelligence as these preparations on the part of Russia gets more and more serious. So we're watching kind of real time as, the American public, all of us, as these preparations for potentially the worst invasion in Europe since 1945. That's why we're seeing it all in a way that we haven't always seen in past, buildups to war.
All right, Michael Santo, thank you so much for joining us here on the show. I think we're going to talk a little bit later to you in the evening, as well as the developments keep coming in here to the newsroom. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
And we want to go back out to some of the reporting that we have on President Zelensky as he is addressing the people of Ukraine. He's rejecting Moscow's claim that his country poses a threat to Russia and warns that a looming Russian invasion could cause tens of thousands of deaths. This is a major development in the case here. He made the comments in this video address, which is mostly what we've been getting from him throughout the week. He said the people of Ukraine and the government of Ukraine want peace, but if we come under attack that threatens our freedom and lives of our people, we will fight back. Zelensky says he tried to call Russian President Vladimir Putin late Wednesday, but the Kremlin remained silent.